Welcome to Industry Insights. Today I'm talking to Matthew Regusci, owner of Fostering Compliance. Hi everyone, and welcome to today's session of Industry Insights. My guest is Matt Regusci, and I'm very happy to have you here today. Matt, will you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, so I'm Matt Regusci, been in the food compliance industry my whole career. I was able to create a GFSI or help create a GFSI standard called Primus GFS when I work with Primus, and supply chain data management with Azul, and then ended up my partner and I owning our own GFSI and other types of food compliance company called WQS, which we sold recently to Kima. And now I'm a consultant in the TIC industry, testing, inspection, and certification.
Looks like you're a consultant with a lot of background information and knowledge and expertise. So you're just the right person to talk to for me today. And we've decided to talk about recalls, the pains of recalls, and we wanted to focus specifically on the manufacturer side, because that is a segment that's almost forgotten, because manufacturers usually don't have to do that many recalls, but
Right.
if they have, it's crisis and hell kind of breaks loose. And so what is your experience from the manufacturing side?
It was funny. I just sent a response off to a publication about a recall that just happened recently. I don't want to really say anything just yet, and they were wondering, why is it that it took so long for the company to do the recall right? And the reason is they don't practice. We were talking about this earlier, Stephanie, and so much of recalls are underneath the issue of just crisis management, right? So, oh my gosh, what do we do if we have a recall? Oh, that's under crisis management, as opposed to putting it under the everyday processes that we deal with in terms of GMPs and sanitization and just our GFSI type of processes. Recall management is underneath something that's different, and it shouldn't be. It should be something that is practiced regularly, just so that it doesn't become a crisis.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's already you're of course you're nervous because you know that there is so much at stake, and you want to protect consumers and everything, and you want to make sure you inform your customers as soon and as efficient and complete as possible. And so yeah, practicing of course helps a ton to get over the nervousness and the excitement, and so getting out of the crisis management area, putting it in the daily business, helps a ton.
It's not just also making sure that your consumers know. I mean, that's really, really important, but it should be under brand management. So, like retailers and food service companies have to deal with recalls all the time. And I find it's interesting how much is the emphasis is on that, because it's obviously they have to practice it all the time because they're dealing with it all the time. But it's underneath brand management. It's so important. And if the supply chain would look at it more like that, then it would be different, because now you'd have more of an emphasis on the ROI. Mm-hmm. As opposed to it being just an expense, which really is that big of an expense to practice this occasionally, but it is time. Time is an expense. But, so much money is spent on advertising, so much money is spent on branding, and then you have a recall. And if you don't do that right, all of that money gone like that.
Yeah.
That whole entire investment disappears.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. And not only that, but if you imagine being a manufacturer, usually you don't have only one customer, you have several retailers that are your customers, and that will be receiving your products no matter what it is. And so, you need to spread, and you need to almost like, kind of create your own community for yourself. And we call that a recall ready community, because it makes a ton of sense to, once you're communicating about a recall or about a contaminated product, you want to make sure everyone gets the information and gets it in the same standardized way. And if you have this community, recall ready community created, it's just an easy thing to do. I mean, information flows and everyone gets it at the same time, knowing they can rely on the data received.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, Roger and I were talking about this, and when you're a retail or a food service company, you're like a massive retail or food service company, you go through what, 120, 200 of these a year. So you're constantly practicing it. But on the supply chain side, you're maybe once every 8 years. And so it becomes one of those things that just gets missed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's not, you have your testing you have to do, you have your sanitization that you're doing on a daily basis. You have all these things you're doing for GMPs, but it's fascinating. I've been through this war multiple times of massive food safety recalls. We're talking about like a label misuse on allergen, which is the number one issue in terms of recalls. I think something like 33% or 30%, 1/3 around, are just mislabeling allergen stuff. That's the number one recall issue. But man, I have seen businesses, I've seen businesses go under because they just didn't know what to do. They just messed it up, the whole process.
Yeah, and that makes it even more expensive, because then you're being held liable for what you've been doing or not doing in that matter. And yeah, it just adds costs and costs and costs. And that can even take companies out of business because they're just too much money to pay. And I also think a thing that's very important is global supply chains. And so having solutions that work globally, that's what we all need these days, because product doesn't stop at the border. It just, it crosses borders, everywhere. And so we have to have a solution that also crosses borders along with the product.
Yeah. And it's law now, right? So we're talking about foreign supplier verification rule. And so, it's not just doing it to protect your brand. You can go to jail. Like I actually, one of my previous clients went to jail.
Wow.
Yeah, a long time ago, right? But they went to jail. Had to wear ankle bracelets and stuff. I mean, it was not due to them. They just didn't know, right? So they messed up. They just messed up. And so, but now you can't. That's not a good reason anymore. You have the potential, if you don't do this right, of not just losing your business, but going to jail.
Yeah. Who would want that? Right.
No. And it should be just part of, your at least like a couple times a year practicing this and not being afraid.
Yeah. And also you can include your customers in your practices so that they see, oh yeah, well, this manufacturer who sells his products to us, they are prepared, they know what to do, and they are recall ready. So we can rely on the data that we will be receiving from them, which I think is a huge thing in regards of trust, building the trust and just knowing what to expect from your manufacturer.
Right. And with the food inflation, I've been posting a lot about this on LinkedIn and stuff, and writing different articles about it. I mean, the inflation is real, right? The food inflation is real. Yeah. So people are cutting corners. We were just talking about this, Stephanie. Who would have thought that Abbott would have a massive recall, and we can't get formula, right? And I don't know. I mean, I don't know where 100% where that is going to end up being, but I've seen clients have big recalls just because of suppliers. Mm-hmm. And if suppliers are cutting corners, then you really, really need to be understanding not just what's going on in your facility, right? Like, because every single company I've ever worked with, they 100% believe that they have the best food safety program whatsoever. So, the best product and best food safety program. Yes. But what about your suppliers? Mm-hmm. And, if you're practicing these recalls, it shouldn't just be, what happens in your facility because of something physical like glass or metal or something like that, or chemical, but it could be something that happened from your supplier side. Are they keeping up to date on their calibration of things? And, and that crisis can exist because of not what happened in your facility, but what happened from one of your suppliers.
Yeah, you need to know exactly all the way down to the farm or wherever you get your product from. How do they handle product? How do they work? How are their facilities? Yeah, you need to be aware of these things nowadays.
And you need to practice it, right? Because okay, so one of your suppliers has an issue. Well, where is that product? What was that product in?
Yeah, exactly.
And how many of those products was it in? And where did it go? You know? And you need to be able to do that quick, because you'll lose your brand, because your clients don't want to wait a week, and definitely the consumers don't want to wait a week. And you 100% don't want to be in the press or the media because you couldn't figure that out.
Right. Yeah. And coming back to your formula incident, what I think is even more challenging, I mean, of course, it is terrible that there isn't enough formula now in the US, but also getting formula in from different countries outside of the US is not possible. Formula is going to be destroyed at the borders because they are not using an international or global standardized recall system. FDA was worrying about communicating to consumers in the US if there is something wrong with that formula as well. So, I mean, that is just, if there would be a global solution, a standardized solution that everyone would be using, then that could be, out of question, because that would apply to the FDA, and then everyone would be, hopefully safe.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yes. Thank you. But the thing is, I mean, in the end, even if you're, no one really wants to harm any consumers, that's for sure. Right. And companies are often forgetting it's not just any anonymous consumer out there. It also comes back to yourself, your family, your friends that might be affected by product that you have sold and that was not good to go and good to eat. So that is sometimes a little bit narrow-minded to say, yeah, well, maybe it wasn't that, okay, it could still be eaten, but then look at yourself when someone of your family gets sick, and you are the one to blame. No one wants to be that one.
Right. Well, I mean, but it's interesting because every country is different. Like,
right.
I remember I don't know if you remember this, but the Wana Foods issue with Australia, right? So they were like, hey, you have listeria, but it's within our threshold. So, we'll just continue having your stone fruit. And Wana was like, wait, no, because in the United States, it's a zero policy. So you have any type of pathogen, you have to get rid of the product. So different countries even have different thresholds on what they can expect in terms of pesticides. For instance, Europe is very, very different than the United States, and both of those are very different than Japan. Mm-hmm. And so trying to get somebody to agree to that is I live in the United States, and we can't get states to agree on anything. So I very much do not think different countries are going to, but you should think about that when you're thinking about your recall plan as well, right? Like, what happens if, I just missed a pesticide because I was testing for the pesticides that I use, and I sent it off to Japan, and I find out that there was a drift because Japan tested for everything, and it's a 0% policy for that. What do I do? What do I do with that product now that is at the harbor in Japan that cannot be there? Because it's not just pathogens. We always think about that, but really, it could be anything. It could be a labeling issue. It could be a chemical issue, and it could be perfectly fine in the United States, but not in other countries.
Yeah, and that kind of takes me back to the global supply chain. This is just an overall topic to me, because companies these days, they just sell their products globally. So they have to come up with a global solution, and there is just no way out. And they have to think about that. They have to have that in the back of their minds, no matter if their headquarters are in Europe, in Japan, in China, in the US, that doesn't really matter. But they have to find a way that's suitable for all countries they're doing business with.
Yeah. And part of that could be also the audit that you choose as well helps with that. So clients I worked with the United States, so we were my company, my partners and my company was the largest global gap auditing entity in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of that was, where are you selling to?
Yeah.
Because you have to test for that, right? For mainly for pesticides, right? But where do you have the potential to sell to is also a question as well, because you may not sell to Europe, you may sell to Japan, but you may want to sell to Europe, or you may have the opportunity to. And your sales guys, the last thing they're going to do is be like, oh, did we test that before we sent it to? No.
Yeah.
We're just going to send the product off, right? But if you don't have that listed, then you have not just a potential of having a pesticide that you're not supposed to have given that country, but also the potential to lose your certification.
Right.
Because if you sell it and it wasn't listed on one of those countries for global gap, then it's not, so all these things, now you do have a recall issue, and literally everything could have been perfectly fine, except for you just didn't know that you were supposed to test for that pesticide because you didn't think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, wow, Matt, there's a lot to be considered when selling.
But if you're practicing your recalls, then it just doesn't become a crisis.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, but still, there's a lot to be considered, and a lot to work in regards of educating companies, consulting, helping them, being there to support them whenever they have to do a recall and don't know exactly what to do. So yeah, that's good for us.
I can't even tell you how many Fridays at 5 p.m. my whole entire date night with my wife is ruined. We don't even do date nights at 5 p.m. anymore on Fridays, because that's always when a recall happens. And that's always when I get called because somebody's panicking, and it's like, oh my gosh, we just had a recall. What do we do? And I'm like, what do you mean? What do we do? You're GFSI certified. You should be practicing this. Oh, well, yeah.
We should have.
And so, yeah, my wife and I we've chosen different dates because so many of my Fridays
is not good. And
it's always Friday at 5 too.
Right. And you know what? That is a global thing as well. It is Friday here always. So yeah, something in common as well. Well, Matt, I think the time is about up. And I thank you so much for taking your time to do this with me today on a Friday. For me, afternoon.
It's not 5 though.
It's not 5 o'clock yet where you are.
Oh, that's true. It is for you, huh?
It is. Yeah, exactly. So
I guess it's fitting.
Yeah, it fits perfectly. So thank you very much, Matt, and looking forward to having more conversations with you and also meeting you at IAFP in Pittsburgh this year.
Yes.
So,
look forward to it.
Me too. Thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
bye.
That's been today's episode of Industry Insights with my guest, Matthew Regusci. Thanks for your attention and see you again soon. Bye.